I don't work that wing anymore. Nobody does. D-wing went dark after the last round of renovations, fire doors pulled to, temporary drywall up behind them, water isolated, the nurse call head end reprogrammed so the board would forget those rooms existed. Nights like this I float between step down and the back corridor, sit the call console when someone needs a break, run errand duty for the unit clerk who's covering 2 floors. The call board sits at the central desk like a polite threat, amber screen, blocky text, little tones that mean wildly different things depending on who's listening. Bed call. Bathroom pull. Code. Staff assist. Cancel. If you don't know the language, every tone is a beep. If you do, half of them can make your blood turn thin. It was a Tuesday that had spilled into Wednesday. The hospital smelled like waxed floors and the citrus cleaner facilities uses when they want day shift to think an accident never happened. At 1:12 the board gave the bathroom tone. Short long, insistent, the one that trumps everything but a code. The text populated in green and then red, D05 bath pull. I looked at it and my first thought was that someone had fat-fingered a bed rename, because there is no D05 on the active bed list. D-wing is closed. We moved the last patient out in spring, unhung the dome lights, and told the call board to stop caring about that side of the building. The tone repeated because it's not a request, it's a demand. The corridor dome outside a bathroom goes red on a bath pull. The board flashes the station and then pings you again, and you don't get to cancel it from the console because a bath pull requires a hands-on cancel at the origin. You can hit acknowledge to pause the noise for a minute. It'll sing to you again until someone goes to the bathroom and resets the cord. I looked at the fire doors down the hall and for a split second I thought I saw red under the seam, the way color rides a floor when light finds it. I stood, because it felt rude not to. The unit clerk, Anna, stood too, and we both looked at the board like it might admit this was a prank. D-wing, she said. We took it off the map. I hit ACK and the tone cut for 60 seconds. The display kept its opinion, D05 bath pull, now with a timer counting how long it had been active. 9 seconds, 10 seconds. I called switch. Lorna answered, calm like she always is. We don't have D-wing in the head end, she said when I told her what I was seeing. I can see your board mirrored. It says D05 bath pull active. There was a tiny microphone hiss in the line, the sound currency of a building that believes in copper. It shouldn't say that, she added, reasonably. Security's night sergeant, Hale, came up on the radio before I asked. We'll meet you at D, she said. She sent Lewis, the new guard with the keys that make doors behave, and she came herself because she has that superstition that if she witnesses the weird thing, it loses some of its appetite. D-wing's fire doors look the same as every other set of fire doors in the hospital, which is to say they look like the difference between obligation and law. We badge them for drills sometimes. Tonight the reader gave us a red blink, then a green, then the bolt thunked. Behind them. The temporary drywall the contractor put up months ago, a taped seam, a little bow around the edges where the air finds ways through. Through the hairline gap at the floor, the waxed hallway reflected the world in stripes, white overheads, our shoes, the hint of red I'd imagined from the board. Hale crouched. You seeing that? She asked, and we all did, faint red blooming then dying like a heart under the door. The board at the desk kept counting. 1 minute and 13 seconds, 1 minute and 14 seconds. I keyed the little desk intercom to the D-wing zone out of muscle memory. It shouldn't have gone live. The talkback tone chimed, a hiss rose, as if something large and empty had been offered a throat. D-wing, nursing, I said into the gooseneck. It sounded like a joke and not like one at all. The hiss changed like a shell lifts and lowers against your ear. No voice, no movement, just that open line. I cancelled the talkback and felt relief purely because the hiss ended. Facilities Singh arrived with his screwdriver and his infrared thermometer like a man who had slept and deserved better than this. He opened the little annunciator panel beside the fire doors that still thinks it governs D-Wing. The LEDs coded green for no faults, which is a lie that electronics tell with sincere eyes. He pointed the IR gun at the seam. Colder behind by a degree, he said, as though degrees don't mean anything to nights. We called the on-call in telecom to make sure the call head-end hadn't loaded an old backup. Responder map shows D-Wing disabled, the voice said. No stations online there. If your board is populating D05, it's either a supervision failure that's mislabeling or... I don't know. Or a deeply impolite surprise. He paused. Take a picture. We took a picture of a thing that was not supposed to exist. The board read D05 bath pull, timer 2 minutes and 52 seconds, and the camera gave me a blue preview that made all the colors worse. I took the picture anyway. Hale called Lorna and asked her to bookmark the hall camera that looked down D's fire doors. Marked, Lorna said. I'm seeing your crew. No red. Hang on, scratch that. Her voice shifted a centimeter left. For one frame I had a red flare under the door and now I don't. She added, as if she had decided not to be embarrassed about it, also, my time code snuck forward by 90 seconds and then apologized. Bathroom pulls are not patient calls. They're the kind you do not ignore because the difference between help and harm is minutes in a bathroom. It felt obscene to treat this like a ghost story. We needed to lay eyes on the origin, and that origin sat behind drywall and contractor locks. Hale called her boss. Her boss said to cut the lock on the contractor side if we had to. We had to. Behind the drywall the hallway was a half-finished idea, grid ceiling with missing tiles, plastic over old pictures nobody had taken down, a wheeled cart with paint cans and the sweet terpenes of a day shift no one would own tomorrow. The dome lights had been removed over the doorways, in their place were little circles where paint had never met the world. But above the door that would have been D05's bathroom, a dome housing still sat screwed into the wall, empty lens removed, wiring tucked inside. Red still found a way there. It wasn't strong, and it didn't seem to originate from any working fixture, but the housing's interior held a wash of color like someone cupped the idea of red inside metal. The room door itself had no handle, contractor plate over the latch. The bathroom, per the old floor plan, would have been just inside on the left. There's a staff cancel button in those bathrooms, a little square you press to stop the board from shouting, and I wanted to be wrong about that button so badly my hand hurt. Water's isolated, Singh said. Bathrooms shouldn't have supply. He put his ear to the door anyway. There are things you do because not doing them would be rude. He shook his head after a second. Nothing. Back at the desk the board stopped accepting my ACKs. The tone kept at a polite interval, and the timer kept going, and the console ignored my finger. The log printer woke and printed an auto entry that makes sense in daylight and not at night. 116, D05 bath pull active. 117, staff present D05. 117, bath pull active. 118, cancel D05 by staff ID 0000. Then, 118, bath pull active again, as if a person had tried to help and then thought better. We don't have staff ID 0000, Anna said, because she takes inventory of people the way the board inventories calls. It's a default, telecom said over speaker, for unassigned clears, and then, after a beat, but you can't clear a bath pull remotely. You have to hit the bathroom cancel plate. We opened the room because sometimes the answer is to be accused of what you didn't do. Hale cut the contractor plate clean and we pushed into the dim. The air had that new old smell of dust that has decided to be important. The bathroom door stood open, and the pull cord hung beside the toilet, a plastic triangle at the end of a string like every other bathroom in the hospital. The plate where the string terminated looked old, legacy style, before we swapped to the newer ones with backlit buttons, but we'd left a few in D-Wing when we shut it down because removing live plates means capping live wires, and every time you cap live wires you invite a short to be your friend. The little LED on the plate did not glow. The string hung slack and honest. I reached out and found myself not touching it. The impulse to pull and make the board behave like the plate belongs to the same part of your brain that stands at cliff edges and wonders what gravity might do if you let it. Singh touched the plate with his screwdriver, popped the face carefully. The smell of old plastic and human hands came out at us. The wires wore wire nuts that looked like they'd been turned last year, not a decade ago. He shorted the test pins to simulate a cancel. If this board is still part of the loop, that should clear the call, he said. It didn't. The board at the desk kept counting. 6 minutes and 54 seconds, 6 minutes and 55 seconds. The printer chirped again and spat. 120, staff present D05. 120, cancel D05 by staff ID 0000. It printed like a person trying to be helpful at the wrong time. We tried the intercom again now that we were inside the wing. The callboard's little talk button lit. D05, nursing, I said to drywall. The hiss answered, only now it wore a different shape, as if it had learned a word and refused to say it. You can convince yourself of anything that ends a shift. I convinced myself the hiss included a tiny water sound the way one radio hears the leak in another. Singh shook his head without looking up. Supply off, he said. I turned it off. Then, after a second, unless someone turned it back on. He pulled his radio and called Facilities Central. D-wing water, he asked. Isolated, the voice said. Tagged out. He made a small face at nobody. Right. Hale did something kind. She stood in the bathroom doorway, pressed the cancel plate with the palm of her hand like it was a person, and said out loud, we're here. The board back at the desk didn't react, how could it, but her voice changed the room, not by much, just enough to make the air more ours. It's night shift nonsense. It matters anyway. We walked the hall because if you stand still too long the building thinks you don't respect it. Over D07 at dome housing, 2. Over D09, nothing. Half the doors plated. At the end of the hall, the old utility closet sat with its louvers gone, the opening covered by poly sheeting that breathed calm breaths. I stood and watched the plastic a full 30 seconds like a person owes oxygen tax. It heaved in and it heaved out, and my eyes said the in was a little longer than the out. At 1:26, the board did something rude. It stopped showing D05 and flashed D05 cancelled, and then immediately displayed D05 bath pull again. The timer didn't reset to 0 when it returned. It kept counting from where it would have been if it had never stopped. The printer obliged with receipts like a teenager trying to talk their way out of a lie. 1:26, cancel by staff ID 0000. 1:26, bath pull active. The head end should supervise the loop, telecom said when we told him. If there's a fault, it should throw a supervision alarm. I don't see supervision. I see bath pull. He paused. I don't know how to tell you this, but D05 isn't in the map. The only way to print D05 is if someone resurrected the old map or, he didn't finish. You don't finish sentences that make other people's jobs harder for no reason. We called the path supervisor because bathroom pulls and pathology both own pieces of your night when you're unlucky. She answered kindly and told us to humor the system by doing what it wanted. If it thinks it needs a bathroom cancel, give it a bathroom cancel. Pull the cord and then cancel it in front of it. I felt ridiculous and grateful for the directive. We did as told. I pulled the cord. The plate's little LED glowed a nothing color that meant the light had been given 10 lifetimes of service already. The corridor dome above the door, empty housing or not, flushed red, honest, bright, impossible. The board grabbed the call and screamed its tone like a hymn. I pressed the cancel plate. The LED went dark. The dome should have gone white for staff present, the housing reflected a smear of white that may have been ours. The board stopped. The printer printed, 1:30, bath pull active. 1:30, staff present. 1:30, cancel by staff ID 0000. The tone quit. The timer reset to 0. The entry in the log glowed back at me like we'd done a correct thing. And then, 30 seconds later, the board chimed that same short long and wrote the same words in the same order. D05 bath pull. Timer 1 second, 2 seconds. I felt the precise despair of someone jammed between an automatic door and a sensor that refuses to acknowledge your arm. We repeated the ritual. It worked and didn't. The board condescended to accept our cancel and then asked again. The printer marched forward, its header time 3 minutes faster than Lorna's clock, and we had the old story wearing a new hat. Wrong time, right order, no idea. We escalated like professionals. Telecom came physically, half-dressed, the scowl of a person who likes being right. He opened the head-end rack in the closet behind the desk and pulled the call controller blade halfway and reseated it. He checked the backup battery. He ran a self-test and the board cheerfully congratulated itself on a job well done. He pulled up the map and showed me that D05 wasn't there. The controller is inventing a station it doesn't know, he said, which is not a sentence anyone wants to put in a report. Facilities tagged the breaker that feeds the D-wing dome circuit even though there shouldn't be one. They flipped it off. The dome housing above the bathroom door kept reflecting red when we pulled the cord. Not power, Singh said. Backfeed. Or imagination. At 1:41 the system widened its attack. The overhead code panel at the unit desk blinked orange for half a second, the color it uses to show staff assist in a specific zone. It read staff assist D05 for a blink and then returned to normal, as if changed its mind. The code phone on the desk chose that exact second to ring and then stopped ringing before any of us could lift it. We all exhaled and pretended the tone of that exhale was normal. The last thing was small. It always is. At 1:47 the printer rolled a slip I didn't understand until later. It read, 1:44, bath pull, D05, time to answer, 3:31. The time to answer line prints for compliance, how long from call to staff present. We'd cancelled at 1:30, which is a minute after we pulled. The printer believed 3 minutes had happened where one had. I kept the slip because I keep the slips that impugn the part of the night that refuses to be argued with. By 2 o'clock, as if the building decided boredom was an acceptable compromise, the board stopped showing D05. We stood in the doorway of the bathroom and waited to be told what to do and nothing told us. Singh put the plate back together with an honesty I admire. Telecom saved the controller map to a USB he will label something polite. Hale cut us loose with a look that said, go sit down before you ask the next thing, you've already done everything right. Morning solved the parts morning can. Telecom rebuilt the head-end database, rebooted it after clearing the non-existent wing, traced the ghost D05 to a decommissioned bridge in the telecom closet that had been left powered even though its ports had been told to die. Facilities removed the empty dome housing and capped the old branch with a proper blank. They traced the bathroom's plate run and added a tag that said, out of service, in a handwriting I recognize because it hates being wrong. The call board behaved all day. Day shift looked at our printouts like a person looks at someone else's dream and agreed not to throw them away. None of that explains a bathroom pull in a room nobody was using, or a dome that flushed red without a lens, or a time delta that made our answers 3 minutes slower than we were. I can show you the rational inventory because listing it is how you stay employed, latent legacy map on head end, picking up a supervision return and mislabeling it as D05, backfeed on a still-powered loop causing a dome to light even with the lens gone, the printer's clock drifting ahead after a power bump, a cancelled call reasserting because the cancel plate belonged to a different zone when the map didn't agree with the wire. All those words live on forms and keep risk managers warm. What I remember instead is the shape of the red under the fire doors before we cut them, and Hale's hand on the cancel plate like a priest's palm, and the hiss on the talkback that didn't sound like water and then did, and that feeling I always get when the building performs a trick it learned when the map of itself was different, that we are not the only keepers of its memory. Somebody once bathed a patient in D05 and pulled a cord, and the system learned a path from that pull to our desk, and when we deleted the path in software the habit stayed. I float nights. This week I sit a different board on a different floor and the tones mean the same things in a different order. When a bathroom pull comes in I move faster than for anything but a code. If it cancels itself without a staff present, I go anyway. If a board shows me a room that doesn't exist, I will look at the door that no longer opens and wait the polite length of a breath, then go do the job in front of me, because that's how you stay a person here. What happened took 40 minutes and 3 pages of thermal paper and lives now in a folder under my bed labeled things no one asked me to keep. I have the picture of the board reading D05, and if you zoom in you can see my reflection in the screen, a ghost with a badge. You can tell me it was wires and I'll nod because it was. You can tell me it was something else and I'll nod because sometimes night uses wires to say a thing it doesn't have a word for. Either way, if you work here, you answer, and you write the time, and you press the cancel plate when the room insists, and you go back to the desk and initial the log like that was the point.